And then share screen. Welcome everyone. So in a second here, I'll have the slides up. So this is, welcome to seminar 4 of 4, even though we kind of skipped seminar 3, but this is the final time we'll be meeting as a group online as part of Frontier Incubators. We've now all introduced each other, so I'm not going to do that. What we're going to do tonight, same housekeeping slide we keep seeing, right? We want you to talk, but be on mute when you're not. And the second one doesn't actually work when someone's sharing screen. So, but please do type in chat or just come off of mute and break in if you want to say something. And it's a seminar, so we're expecting everybody to chime in on answers to these questions. So I posted this agenda to the Slack channel about 11 hours ago. We're going to debrief briefly from last week. We'll check in on how everyone's doing. We'll talk about when we're going to do the one-on-ones. And then we're going to talk about Plan F, as in Plan B and C and D. And I called it F because it's a letter that's far enough out there. So let's jump right in there. So let's just start with how last week went. We had some people show up and we didn't know who they were. We could kind of guess from their names and from what they said, what country they were from. But let's just start off with a high-end question of how is the content? Well, let's actually start with a question I didn't put on this list, which is, did you get any feedback from the investors that showed up that you invited?
Hi, this is Min. Should I start?
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. In fact, last week we invite 8 did really register for the webinar, and 7 show up was from our side. They include angel investor. There's one guy, Zoom from CCP. He is supporting us in the angel workshop, hopefully in November. That's why he asked to join. And now the others were the angels and angel to be from Vietnam. So the lady called Zhang, she did ask several questions, and the guy from a bank in Vietnam who is now the lead investor in of 10 angels in the country. There are also 3 others who attended the meeting right at the room, and Ms. Ling, who also raised several questions, and 2 others. But in fact, the 2 others, they have language barriers, so they left in the middle of the webinar. It's also a kind of problem here with angel investors. They have money, but they are not very good at English. So the feedbacks, we got excellent feedback from them, 3 of them. In fact, those who posed the most questions, because they find the content really useful for them and really make them think about, further steps more than just understand what angel is. And this is because we have meeting afterwards. We have lunch with them, so they did share the story that they before they were confused about angels, and they really want to create a community like this where they can exchange ideas on investing and talk true stories about angel investment more than just networking. So I think and especially Mr. Buck, who is from the bank, he's now investing in the stock market. and he is now shifting a little bit to the angel side. I've known him for 2 years. He's been asking me different kinds of questions, and he's really interested in both Seattle Angel Conference and creating a community and a company that can manage the fund, because he is trusted by his own community to build that kind of community and a company here to manage the fund. So he is really looking forward to kind of casual meeting, kind of informal meetings with other angels in our community. So we'll soon organize kind of angels meetup, so that he knows people in the industry. And he's also looking forward to learn more about how to create companies like that and how to create Seattle Angel Conference. So these in this webinar, I also expect to work with you on and especially get your advice on how to move forward with people like him. We also have two others who did not participate in the meeting, but very willing to. One is a true angel investor for startups. He has been investing in nearly 10 of them, but he could not join the meeting. So what he expects from community like this is that he has been kind of lone wolf for quite a long time. He invests his own money in the startups, but he has nobody to share the risks. So he really wants to have somebody to work with him and to form a team. Second is a lady who at the time of the webinar, she was in the UK, and it was too early in the morning, so she could not join. But the lady has already created a fund here in Vietnam. She is a Vietnamese overseas. She's now UK nationality, but she has created a fund here according to the decree 38 that I mentioned several times ago. Yeah. But she said that it's really, really difficult to create that kind of fund.
So is she the one and only person who did it, or is she the second one we know
of? Sorry?
There was last 2 weeks ago or 2 times ago when we talked about this, someone had said there was someone who followed that decree and created a fund, and nobody named who they were, and so this is the second time I've heard of it.
Okay. The first was ICM. ICM opened the fund according to the Decree 38. And she is, I don't know whether the second one in Vietnam, because right now there are several companies who create that kind of fund, but to my understanding,
sorry to break in, but so it's no longer, okay. We no longer have the assumption that there's only one and only one.
Okay, yeah, exactly. She had really difficulty in creating that kind of fund. It took her nearly 3 months and a lot of lobbying, and she did not know. She said when she comes to different kinds of, agency, and they say it's too new and there's no instruction on that. So finally she found a company in Ho Chi Minh City in law, a law firm, and then the law firm supported her in create that fund, and now she is having two angels to really put the money in the bank account of the fund.
But this means that we know someone who's done it now, and if that banker to do it, mm-hmm. He can now,
exactly,
turn to her and hopefully she would help.
Yeah.
And one of the things I run in Seattle is a fund manager peer learning group. And today we had 2 people who are working on putting a fund together who have been interviewing other venture capitalists, sort of debrief all of their notes from all of the venture capitalists they visited. So if you set up a peer learning group, you can help other people make those funds easier. So it sounds like normal startup landscape for me. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And even more if you could get the ministry people to do it over lunch and get the ministry folks to show up so that they can understand it's been done before.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, or at least get an interview with them and find out like what did they do to get it through, so that it's a checklist instead of a lobbying.
That's great. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome.
Good point. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So thanks for that. Let's just stop that there. Greg, do we know if anyone from the Philippines was online?
No, not that I know of.
Okay, not that I could tell from names either, but okay. And then the open question would be, it's not do we need to do it? It's like how many more times do we need to do this? And what topics do, and we don't want to answer this now in real time, but like on the list of homework assignments, how often how often would it be useful to have a webinar with an American speaker who knows something about angel investing, and we can find more. And then what topics do you guys think would be useful to do that in real time as a webinar, as opposed to this big pile of video content that is coming? Once we're done with today, the next thing on the list is to create a website called the Angel Accelerator and start filling it with content that is consumable whenever you want, sitting on YouTube so that you guys can put in subtitles in your own languages, and all the trappings to help you do this without us having to be there in real time. So put that on the list of homework assignments. Okay, so I guess we just got the debrief from Vietnam on how the recruitment's going, and it sounds like you're headed down the right path. It sounds like you could theoretically have a handful of key investors in the next month or two, and then hopefully they have a network themselves to bring in the rest. Greg, you said you're doing another effort to organize the angel crowd there in Manila. You don't have to give us the details if you don't want, but like, what's the scale? What's your goal on that effort in terms of numbers of angels?
Sure, yeah. So in terms of numbers of angels, we haven't actually pinned that down yet, but we do have kind of a rough number in terms of the number of investments that we want to make.
Can you speak closer to the mic? You're really soft.
Oh, okay. I'm on. Hold on, I have headphones. Is that better?
Yeah.
Hello?
Yes, much.
Yeah. Okay. So we haven't actually pinned down the number of angels, but we have pinned down the number of investments that we do want to make over a 10-year period. So kind of a long-term plan. We want to do about 100 investments at 100,000 each.
Okay.
And so it is very interesting for me to hear, as I mentioned, I had watched the previous seminar, that in terms of the expectations for the angels, we should expect them, I think you mentioned, to make 20 investments of 5,000 each, or for a total of 100,000 for each of them. So this is something that we can factor in and figure out the number of angels. But basically, we're thinking we'll start with 5, and we're doing a scan of the market. We have one portfolio company who attracted that level of investment, about 5,000 US from 2 angels that they tapped into separately. And so I think there's a market for that. But in parallel, we're also looking to tap foundations who are more philanthropic and maybe more family type foundations who are able to take on more of that risk and kind of bring them around to seeing the entrepreneurial and more market-based approach as a form of investment. Essentially, foundation grant money is kind of the ultimate risk capital. So that's one stakeholder that we also want to educate, apart from the individual ones.
Okay, so this is where we should just quickly chime in a lesson from webinar 1 or 2, which is there's a huge a huge difference in outcomes between gathering a bunch of angels who think they might write a check if the right company comes along, and doing the model of an angel group, versus gathering a bunch of angels who have all committed a minimum amount of money, if it's 5,000 or 10,000 US equivalent, saying, I will be writing a check for this amount, or I have written a check, even better, for this amount. And we just need to find the one company we all agree on to give it to. And so that's really what we're talking about doing through this program. And it's proven to move money and make people learn how to invest. And the angel the angel group model, when you talk to the people who run them or the people who sit on boards that help run them, you find out that 75-80% of the members write very few checks. They go to the meetings, they call themselves angels, they don't do the due diligence, and they don't actually write the checks.
We actually have one or two of those here. They hold regular meetings, they don't actually write checks. But yeah, I'm not sure if I didn't articulate properly, but we're thinking more foundation types, not the angel groups, because also the angel groups that are existing are more on the commercial side, more interested on investing on the commercial side. And so there's really no network existing for the impact enterprise.
Okay. So it sounds like you're still pretty early and don't have those 5 key investors yet.
Yeah, there's kind of a short list, and we're gonna start talking to people, within a month, and update you further once it happens.
Okay, and then you're new, so I'm not going to ask you the questions on the second bullet there, but what we need to help you. So homework assignment number 2 here is, so it sounds like both groups are already starting to gather angels. That's clear. But what date are we driving to? So if it's again, if nominally it's a 12-week program, but you got to get the angels before you start to clock on the 12 weeks. Excuse me. What date are we driving to that is day 1 of the meetups to get the angels to show up to commit to be part of the program? And then what's the pencil date for the actual start of that 12 weeks? And then what is 12 weeks later look at? So in order for us to put it in our schedule to support you, we need to know when we need to support you. And then last one on that bullet list is also important, which is, given the start and end of the program, if that's your program dates, and just assuming you're not going to move them too much, what's the date when you say this isn't going to work this year? And so I've been through this many times with my Accelerator and other programs. It's like, well, unless we have the funding, because we invest, and the applicants, well, then we can't do the program. And so every once in a while in the course of the last 7 years, we've pushed out the program by, in our case, 6 months, because we hit some magic date where it no longer made sense. I see John leaning back, so he's been able to always pull it out. Right, you've done 15 straight to a year.
Yeah, not without its tribulations.
Yep. But you've never had to go. You probably sat around going, well, we're going to go forward with 15 instead of 40.
No, I've set, if on the first day of the investor thing, if we don't have 20 committed angels and we don't have at least as many companies as we have angels, we won't run it.
Huh.
And so that's the, we will give you your money back at that date, and none of the LSC managers have been willing to be the ones that do that. So we've always hit that target, sometimes just by an inch, but yeah, we've always hit that target.
So from what I've experienced, deadlines help a lot, even if they're just made up deadlines, just to say, we have to have you committed on this day. I've run funds for, talk about programs we highly don't suggest you run. But I've run nonprofit prize fund investment funds for nonprofits doing competitions. And we just said by that's the day you have to write your check by. And so we were able, because we made up some date, to twist the arms of some investors to just write the check already. And you know, some of them disappeared on us, and we had a date that said, all right, we don't have to hunt them down after that date, which is also a nice thing to do. And if we don't have X dollars, we're not going to do the fund. But we always manage to twist enough arms to do those funds.
But at the same time, I've had, you know, something like 60 to 70% of the companies come in the last 4 hours of the deadline. So it also causes anxiety the other way.
Yeah. So I don't know about you. You guys running your accelerator programs, but historically we had that as well, which was half the applicants would show up in the last 48 hours of the deadline. So back then we were only doing about 200 applications, but you know, we didn't like a whole lot of the first 100, and those were all reviewed before the application deadline. And then bam, you go from 100 to 200 in the last 48 hours. And so in the old days, I used to stay up. The deadline was always midnight local time. So I always used to stay up at midnight and watch them flow in. And I don't do that anymore. Now they usually come in a lot earlier. I don't know what the difference is on that. We'll move on to that. All right.
And now you set the deadline for noon so that you don't have to stay up.
No, I still set it for midnight. I just I don't stay up to read the last few. I read them the next day. Because there's already a lot by then. There's usually more than, now there's more than I could possibly bring in 48 hours beforehand. I've started the interviews well before the deadline. And so I don't know, if they're late, they're late. That's now a detriment. If you had 4 months to apply for the program, at least on the startup side, if you had 4 months to apply for the program and you choose to do it at 11 p.m. on the very last day, you're just showing me you're probably not the entrepreneur that I should be bringing in. Like, it's just a huge red flag.
Yep.
Even worse when you email me at 11:30 p.m. saying the system won't seem to accept my submit button. Well, yeah, I should have done it yesterday. Anyway, so all right, next step of this program, when we submitted this program to Frontier Incubators, it was webinars, seminars, and then one-on-one help. We did get permission to do the one-on-one help anytime after September 15th. And so, again, homework number 3 here is the ask of us on when you want our help. Right? One-on-one meaning we can get on a Skype call or a Zoom call sometime that's convenient to both of us and talk through whatever issues you're having. And talk through, give you advice on how to pull in more investors and how to use the network you have and how to pull in more entrepreneurs. We haven't talked anything about entrepreneurs. I'm assuming you guys know how to do that, but if you need help there, I can help with that as well. And again, I don't want to do this in real time. We'll just put that on the list of homework assignments. And then the last one, maybe it's more relevant, maybe it's irrelevant now that we heard that someone's cracked this new fund structure in Vietnam, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway, which is what role does, I'm going to reword this to say, what role does foreign funds have in helping grow your ecosystem? So I wear a lot of hats in the world. One of the hats I wear is an online network for impact investors called investorflow.org. I started that 2.5 years ago. It's got 440 investors in it, where the investors are a mix of people, family offices, foundations, and funds, plus a few other scattered things. I know and we create investor profiles for everyone who joins. That's how you join, is creating a profile. And so I know there are investors in that network. that are investing in Southeast Asia. We don't ask them specific countries, so I don't exactly know where they're investing. My guess is not a lot of them are investing in either Vietnam or Philippines, or you would know them. But there's some out there, and we're barely touching all the impact investors there are in the world. And so if we could tap into that, and if we could tap into the angels here in the US who want to do good with their money, who might be willing to put their trust in a fund manager and a structured program, what should we do with these foreign investors? Should we just think of them, or the normal path is either think of them as co-investors, that the local angels should be finding the right deals, making the first investments, getting some progress on these companies, and then showing them off to the foreign investors. Or maybe if it really is this as difficult as it probably is to get enough angel investors to get the $100,000 checks into these companies, should we be thinking of these foreign investors as co-investors in these funds we're setting up? Should we be asking them to commit $50,000 to a fund, and your angels will find the right deal for them? Right? That might be amenable to some of these foreigners who want to have people on the ground but can't afford to send a staff to all these countries. And then the last one on this path is that is it easier to bring in money from outside the country to invest in the local companies? Or is it even possible in Vietnam? Is it possible for foreigners to come in and invest in the country, or is the bureaucracy and the rules make that just way too hard? And then the middle bullet is like, if you were to do this, if you were to run a fund for foreigners, where would you put it in the world? And so my guess is it would be in Singapore, but I don't know for sure. Right. All I know is if I'm going to offshore a fund in the U.S., I'm probably putting it in the Cayman Islands. If I'm offshoring a fund in Africa, I'm going to put it in Mauritius. If I'm personally putting in a Southeast Asia fund or an Asia fund, I would do it in Singapore. I don't know what the other options are. So this one I do want to hear in real time. I want to hear your opinions on this. Greg, let's make you go first this time.
Sure. So where do offshore funds go? Yeah, Singapore is a logical choice, I think, also in terms of taxes and also ease of doing business. In terms of being able to accept foreign funds.
Is it Singapore or is it Hong Kong more often than not for Philippines?
In our experience, more often
Or
than
equal?
not, Singapore, at least for the people that we've talked to,
Okay.
who have made something similar investments. As to accepting foreign funds, there are certain industries here that are restricted. So, for example, the retail industry, if any company involved in retail cannot have more than 40% ownership of foreign ownership, and there's other industries that are protected, but we have to take a look at that list. On our end, what we're actually thinking of is for the angels to invest directly, since we are looking at the legal things that we have to look at in terms of setting up a fund, and we've also talked about setting up an SPV maybe for each investment, but in the initial one, for the initial deals, we're thinking of doing direct investments by the angels.
Okay.
I'm very interested to see the structure of the SPV, how much it costs, how you set it up. If you have that written down anywhere, that would be very interesting.
Not yet. Basically, conceptually, we're thinking, for later, if there's follow-on funding and another investor wants to clean up the cap table, then, it's just easier to kind of via the SPV, if that were the case, rather than having, say, if it's 100,000 fund and 5,000 each. I mean, 100,000 check with investors investing 5,000 each, then 20 people on the cap table or 20 entities on the cap table might not look so good. So we're kind of looking at how to do that.
We use an SPV to simplify things for the Angel Conference, and that sort of is the foundational structure. And so we're very interested in the question of what's the overhead to maintain that structure. Because, you know, eventually, you know, you have 40 investors, all of which have an opinion, and then you have 40 people to have a conversation with. It's quite a barrier for the entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And also, if you have 100 investments over 10 years, by year 10, if you're making SPVs, you have 50 or 60 or 70 of these running. What's the overhead of running? Not one of them. What's the overhead of running 10 of them?
Yeah.
So I manage four SPVs here in the States, and 11 funds that are Fledge. The 11 funds for Fledge is a whole lot easier than the 4 SPVs.
Yeah, I can imagine. So still quite a lot of things to think through. So that's why this is very helpful. But as soon as we have more information on the cost of running the SPV and the structure, then we'll get that to you.
Okay. Do you see a lot of foreign investors in the Philippines in startups?
Not in startups, no. Supposedly there's a lot of foreign direct investments, but some of them are kind of subsidiaries. Some of them are existing companies. With the startup, not so much.
Yeah, I don't know any. So.
Isn't there a Founders Institute program in Manila?
Yes, I recently came across them. Plan to check them out, as part of our research as well.
Isn't Bobby Liu from Vietnam connected into that conversation?
Bobby Liu, no, I'm not sure. I mean, if you could make an introduction, that would be great too. I only came across the website, and they
don't invest cash though.
No, but he was saying that 70% of the companies graduating were getting invested. And so he's got some data sets there about where they're getting invested from. And there's apparently 6 Founders Institutes that are all sort of meeting together that he's part of. So that's both Vietnam and Thailand and Indonesia. And I thought it was the Philippines.
Okay. I'm going to be surprised if there isn't startup investors, if not just Singapore startup investors that are investing in this area. I'm just not coming across a whole lot of American or Europeans.
Right.
Yeah, there's some, more on the tech side, like coins.ph recently got bought out. Gojek made an investment. But on the impact side, which is the space we're more familiar with, there's not a lot.
Okay, thanks. Anything else you want to add to this slide? Topic?
Sorry, me?
Yeah, you. Great.
No. I think I'm good. Thanks.
Okay, well, let's head back to Vietnam. So, do we need to worry about this? And is it something we should be talking about?
Yeah, there is a kind of, to my observation, there is several trends, I think. The startups won't get investment, but most of them will set up the company in Singapore. I won't work with several startups this week because they promised to tell me the difficulties of getting investment and every kind of legal problems. So I'll get back to you when I have the real case. But there is a fact that startups get investment and then they will set up their company headquarters in Singapore, and they offer kind of a branch in Vietnam only. These won't be kind of a threat to local angels. If they want to invest in the startups, they will have to invest overseas. And this is kind of, I mean, another domain of the laws that is not very, very easy to do. Foreign investors, they will tap into the market, but I think they will work with a law firm to do this, of course.
So is it in this case, there's a pattern we see in the States, which I think it's an anti-pattern that shouldn't be copied. But a bunch of the accelerators that work with overseas companies and bring them to the States will require them to set up an American parent company in order to make the accelerator investment or any investment. And some of the investors do the same thing. And so we wind up with a bunch of companies that do no business whatsoever in the U.S., but the parent is in the U.S. And we don't do that in my program, although we have incorporated two companies, two African companies, no, one African and one Argentinian company here, because those countries are not good places to incorporate. So this would be, if this is a trend, one thing to worry about is if the foreign investors have more money being invested and make this happen, that gets in the way of your local angels.
Exactly. And I mean, maybe next week, after next week when I talk to them, I intend to talk to the ministry guys. We're working closely with the two ministries of science and technology, who is assigned by the government to run startup activities, startup support activities. And the second very active ministry is called the Ministry of Planning and Investment. So we'll be, I mean, at least from outside, as a private organization, we'll be talking to both to find out, I mean, whether they realize the threat. I don't know. Maybe the Decree 38 is something to boost local investment in startups, but they have not really foreseen the risks of the current laws, not just related to them, but I mean every laws are related to the startups side of thing. One more point about, is not related to investment, but one more point is that the enterprise law in Vietnam right now is not protecting the private sector. That is a very big problem, because they can give different kinds of, I mean, favorable conditions, but in fact, there are two laws right now affecting the startups so much. Is the labor law and the enterprise law. The startups do not feel that they are protected by the law, because I mean, in terms of equity sharing, in terms of, I mean, getting more investment and all these things, they tell me the general problems, but then I will have to figure out the specific ones when I talk to them this week and next week. So hopefully I will have more, I mean, specific problems. But those are the things that that call the obstacles to the startups, and many of them think of, I mean, opening the company overseas and then still operating here in Vietnam, because they still need the talents in the market.
Yeah, just note in this anti-pattern that we see in the States, it's a parent company that's incorporated in the United States that has no employees and does no operations. The norm is that there's then a subsidiary company. There's a separate corporate entity that is incorporated in the country where they do business, where all the employees actually work for that company. And it's 100% owned by the parent company overseas.
Yeah.
So it's a company, the parent company is just a company that owns companies. And then the actual pattern that is useful is once, hopefully it's a problem you guys will have to get to at some point, although I don't know where you go from Philippines, is once you get investment company and it's succeeding and it wants to start doing business in a neighboring country. Typically what we do, at least in Africa, is that we now have to create a company in the neighboring country. And now we have a multinational. Now we have multiple companies all operating with the same name or name with the country name afterwards. And now you got to make a hierarchy and you really need a parent somewhere. And so this is where we start to get to the correct pattern, which is where do we put the parent company? And in Africa, it goes in Mauritius because there's no taxes. So it's a lightweight place to do business. But sometimes they put the parent company in the United States because it's more trusted. But again, there's no employees here. The money just flows around between the three entities until they get to the next country, and that's 4 entities and so forth. Right. As opposed to the parent company being in Kenya, and now you got to deal with, well, how does Kenya tax income that's created in Rwanda, which is nearby but not bordering, and life gets complicated.
Okay.
All right. Anyway, I added a 4th bullet because I thought of that as you guys were talking about foreigners, which is both Vietnam and Philippines have a whole bunch of expats, right? Millions of expats. And if we're talking about raising $5,000 an investor, that puts it within range of a middle-class American who's 1st or 2nd or 3rd generation from your home country. But they're not, they're, I don't know if they're considered, if they are all the expats, have they all given up their citizenship? Are they dual citizens? Are they just Americans or Europeans or Singapore or whatever? So how does the law work with them? So I'm going to put that on the list of homework as well. If you want to deal with that, how do you tap that market? Right? And I happen to live on an island that's nominally in the Pacific Ocean, although it's in Puget Sound. And it historically was settled by Scandinavians, Japanese, and Filipinos. So we have just around me within 10-minute drive is probably 1,000 Filipino expats who've been 3rd generation living on Bainbridge Island. All of which could write $5,000 checks.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if they have any interest. I don't know if they're still looking back. I don't know if they still have family ties. But, Philippines has this weird relationship with the U.S. because we took it over from Spain 140 years ago. It was every Filipino was allowed to come to the United States and just declare themselves a citizen for 50 years or so. So there's a huge expat population here. And then we have a stranger relationship with Vietnam because we tried to take over that country-ish. And so there's a huge number of Vietnamese in the West Coast and in Texas that came after the war. So in terms of these 2 countries in particular, there's a large middle-class population in the U.S. that's probably still remitting money back to their home country, or their old country, as we'd say in my culture. And I've seen those numbers on the Philippines on remittance. It's a huge number.
Yeah, I think I was going to say that's another market that we could tap. Behavior-wise, a lot of them like to send back money for projects related to their hometown, which is in a way good, but not strategic, not necessarily impactful. So that would be an interesting market to educate.
Yeah. So one question I've never dared ask my lawyers or any lawyers in the States is, can a foreign company or a foreign fund advertise a fundraise to American citizens? So we have really restrictive laws in this country about advertising for investment. And so it is not possible, it's not easy. It used to be not possible at all, but it's not easy for a fund to advertise, so like buy ads on Facebook to promote something to the general public.
I believe that they take the same approach as they do to the 1930s liquor, which is if you're an American and you're not in the United States, you can't be advertised either. And so
Yeah.
no matter where you go in the world, you're under SEC regulation, apparently.
Yeah, but I don't know if a foreigner is doing this to an American over an internet connection,
Yes.
if there's any jurisdiction. And I don't want to ask because I don't want the answer to be no.
Right.
Right. And I'm sure that more than half of the lawyers I would ask would say no because they're conservative. And so they might not have the answer, but they're going to say no.
Right.
So I've never dared ask this question. So it may or may not be possible to use a system like Facebook to find these expats.
Well, you
what I do know is that I
can find them. You just can't offer them any investment over it.
You and I can't, but I don't know if they can or can't.
No, well, see, I think that, I mean, building relationships with people through social media is still building relationships.
Yeah. Anyway, so I'm gonna leave it at that point of maybe it's worth looking at, and maybe it's illegal. We don't know, and I can't dare answer that question for you, unfortunately.
I think of all of the homeworks you provided, the most important one is the slide about what happens when, what's the event, when will be the event, and what's the structure of the investment. And so if we can't get solidity on that, everything else will slide around.
Yep. All right, and that's all I had for today. So just to recap on assignments here. Homework 1 is it's related to homework 2 or 3 here, which is when should we start helping you one-on-one? But when should we expect you to ask us to do another webinar? What topic is best done in real time as opposed to recorded, because we will be providing a recorded material. What are the true dates? We want you to, after this, sometime in the current next week or two, send us your proposed dates on when this is actually going to happen, including the go, no-go date. Is it worth dealing with foreigners, foreign foreigners and expat foreigners? Is that something we should even be thinking of in the next year, or just punt it and focus solely on locals? All right, is there anything else anyone needs from us today? Anything we can help you with while we're here?
Hi. In fact, the questions of having a YouTube channel is really good for us because, as I mentioned before, we have language problems for several potential investors. So we did ask friend to Incubator, and they now we're now waiting for the answers. But we do hope that we'll have basic training for the local investor as the very first step of the funnels, where we attract more of them to be interested in. We will be ready to translate them into Vietnamese so that they know the general concept, and we can have people interested in to really talk to. In order to have kind of 20 potential ones, really ambitious, but we hope we will have them. But we try to kind of really educate the market on this concept and how to be kind of good potential angel investors. So if the channel is there, we'll be working hard on spreading it, and I think it's like a commitment because no one is doing something here for the story of educating the angels. So I mean, it's not questions, but it's a kind of commitment. If we get support from you on the fundamental training, like the webinar we did last time, I think it's really useful if it can be in the Vietnamese version, so that we can really educate more people, bring them into the story, and creating the very first community of, I mean, people who are willing to work together. That's what we want to share.
Okay.
So
Yeah, so what we've done before with Fledge and languages, because we do Fledge in a lot of different countries, is all our videos are posted on YouTube. If you've not done it before, anyone in the world can do a closed caption translation.
okay.
So using the YouTube technology, it pops up I can do that.
Okay.
Pops up the words at the bottom.
Yeah.
It will automatically create one in English or whatever language one of 40 languages that people are speaking. And then you can go in and you can hand translate that into whatever language you want. What we won't be able to do with that is have the words on slides change. It doesn't have that feature yet. But as often as possible, we will on this website also include the slides. And I guess given that request, I'll try and always put them in PowerPoint format instead of PDFs, so that you can go in and translate those if you want.
That's great. Okay. Thank you so much for that. We will have a team for really to focus on the kind of, I mean, localization of the content.
Okay, and my goal on this content is to make sure you have more than you need. So everything that John covers when he does the Seattle Angel Conference, and then a whole bunch more past that. Right? That I'm going to go around my network in Seattle and across the U.S. and around the world to go and gather. And I'm headed off to Africa in September, so I'm going to be adding in some from over there as well.
Okay.
And that should be more relevant. Right? The angel investing and the early stage investing that I see happening there should look a whole lot more like what's happening in Vietnam and Philippines and Bangladesh and Pakistan than the U.S. style of investing. I want to make sure this content is not solely U.S. style California investing.
Great, thanks.
Okay, anything else for today? If not, I'll give you back a half hour of your life.
Okay.